Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Rugby Bunker podcast. I'm delighted to have Charlie Morgan of the Telegraph back here. Hi, Charlie. How are you?
Hello, mate. I'm very well, thank you. Been around the houses this week. Up in Newcastle Tuesday, back across to the Lensbury today, where I'm just back from hearing from the England camp ahead of the World Cup final. All go, mate, as ever.
Well, look, keen observers will note that this is not my usual backdrop, but dedication to the cause, Charlie. We're not missing episodes here. Got a very big week with the start of the Premiership not the Premiership, start of Prem Rugby. How many times are we going to do that? 100, and also the Rugby World Cup final. So why don't you tell me first a little bit about the press conference you were at this morning with England?
Yeah, so it was kind of standard fare, captain, head coach up. So John Mitchell, Zoe Allcroft, reasonably calm as ever from those two. You can't shake the feeling, though, that this has been 3 years and more sort of in the making for these guys. They're on a run of 32 unbeaten matches. Everything about this tournament has been geared towards this game at the weekend. And I think there's also an acceptance from them that they haven't quite played their best yet. John Mitchell kept using the word, keep saying that they've been efficient. He sort of set up a bit of a kind of contrast between England's efficiency and Canada's kind of expansive, assured play in the tournament so far, kind of peaking. Well, Canada, I hope they're not peaking, but Canada were exceptional against New Zealand for the first sort of 45 minutes of that game, sort of playing stuff that nobody in the tournament really has got close to yet. And England have been businesslike. John Mitchell kind of argued that one reason that they haven't quite hit their straps is because one of the team's mantras is take the handbrake off, and they're maybe even trying a little bit too much. And I think there's a point there, but their accuracy undeniably hasn't been there yet. And we're talking about a side that we are nitpicking, but we are talking about a side that have won 32 games in a row, and therefore this home World Cup, it feels like it will be, although they are absolutely stressing the fact that they are not outcome based. I think for everybody else, it is fair to base them on the outcome of this tournament, and with winning being the absolute goal.
I mean, listen, they seem to be kind of taking it in their stride, but it's suffocating pressure. Like I rarely feel nervous for a team. We must have mentioned it before. Like the last example I could think of was the 2011 All Blacks on the home soil. Like it's that similar kind of, if you don't get it over the line, what a phenomenal chance gone. Listen, we'll preview up the final a little bit more later, but we're going to kick off with just a bit of chat about the new Prem Rugby season, which starts tonight. We're recording this on Thursday, so by the time this is with you on Friday morning, the first game, Sale against Gloucester, will have already happened, because it's the first time we've had a Thursday night game, which is quite a bold new world, and we'll see how that goes. What Charlie and I have done is we've sort of gone through a Premiership table, and we've picked up our own Premiership tables, and there's some teams where we agree, and there's some teams where we slightly differ, which I think is very healthy. Charlie, it's good for us not to always be aligned on the same page. So we'll kick off with the bottom 5 teams, and we'll go through those, and then we'll get into the teams who we think are going to be near and around the playoff positions come the end of the season. So, Charlie, let's talk about, we're in agreement that the team who are going to come 10th are going to be Newcastle Red Bulls, formerly known as Newcastle Falcons. But I think we probably feel the same, that Newcastle are going to win far more games this season than they did last season, and that they're going to give teams a bit of a headache, especially once we kind of get post November test. I think that's fair to say. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. The tricky thing for them, as you've touched on there, is the timing of this investment has meant that they've had to duck and dive. And by the time this comes out, hopefully a piece will be live from my visit to Newcastle this week. And Steve Diamond's first kind of priority as director of rugby under this new investment was to get a team that could be competitive. He was heading into a skinny market. That is no easy feat, and he's done pretty well, I think, out of that skinny market, with Liam Williams being the last addition, well, but potentially the last addition. That he said that they might add a little bit of scrum half cover just because of injuries around the place, and then being low on bodies there before Benitez Cruz comes back from Argentina's Rugby Championship campaign. But I think the point is that there's enthusiasm there, and there certainly is a bright future, undeniably, and I think they will build up over the course of the next couple of years. Steve Diamond said himself that it's probably going to be a couple of seasons before they are pushing towards the playoffs, which is undoubtedly their aim with this new investment. But it is still a tricky time for them this season. I think there is, I know for sure that there's pragmatism about that up there. They went from winning no games the season before last to winning a couple of games last season. I think they can certainly aim to win 4 or 5. And while that might not be enough for them to get off bottom, I think what effect that will have on the rest of the table is really interesting, because they can really affect the playoff race in that way. And they will be looking up, don't get me wrong. I think privately they will want at least 8th. I just think they have still lost a lot of quality. Radwan left mid season, obviously, to Leicester and hit the ground running there. Ben Redshaw, if we stay with the backs, and then also up front, which is probably the real stinger, has been losing guys like Jamie Blamire, Callum Chick, back out to the back line. Ben Stevenson, even excellent player. He went before this investment came in. So it's still a tricky task up there, and that's why I have them in 10th.
Yep, I think that's all very sound logic and all points that I agree with, especially about the transfer market and kind of getting that money late. In 9th place, Charlie, we have Harlequins. Now, this is as low as Harlequins have been for a long time, and I've seen other forecasts for the season have Harlequins in a similar position to us down in 9th place. I think there are kind of multiple reasons for this, and the departure of Danny Wilson obviously really doesn't help. I think if you lose a senior coach like that so close to the start of the season, however kind of prepared Harlequins might have been for that as a possibility, that's tricky. And so I think you combine that with the fact that it feels like the club is just entering a bit of a new kind of phase, a new era. You've got Jason Gilmore filling in as senior coach while coaching a defence which last season actually, in terms of points conceded, was one of the better ones in the league. It was in attack where they kind of struggled to keep up with the rest of the teams who were topping that 500 points mark in the table. They just feel as though they're in a bit of a transition period, don't they? And if you're in a period like that, as we saw with Exeter last season, it just means that you can potentially miss out compared to the rest of the league who are fighting for those playoff spots, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be close, and we're going to keep coming back to that. It is a bad patch that can really send you tearing down the table from, top 4 contention right to the bottom. So the margins are really fine, and that's not to excuse myself from what is a pretty jarring prediction, I think, and will be for some Harlequins fans. Finishing 9th would be a real blow, but they have been sort of battling in and around there. And to me, I just think a few of those key combinations, the locks probably a bit uncertain. They've lost Danny Kerr, who's obviously will have been a very influential presence as a leader. They've still got Will Porter, who's an excellent player, and they've still clearly have Marcus Smith, who they retained. But I just need to probably see a little bit more from those key combinations, see how they settle over the start of the season. I just feel that there's a little bit more optimism around the other side. Certainly, you're right that can be a really disruptive factor. A head coach leaving right on the verge of the season after he's overseen a whole pre-season where these principles and the way they want to play will have been bedded in, and they will have planned for this first whole block up till the autumn. So that could be really disruptive. They also have a glut of Pumas guys away with the Rugby Championship. So it's going to feel like it's probably going to feel to some degree like they're starting again after those autumn internationals, or certainly, when the Rugby Championship season finishes. It just doesn't seem to me that they're starting on a very solid footing. They obviously have the champions first up on Friday night, the game I'm going to, which could be a very rude awakening. It could also be their chance to sort of rebuild a bit of belief. But yeah, this is already, I feel like we're into, well, even with Newcastle, we're into predictions that can make you look stupid. But this is why I love going up and down and doing the whole table, because there's no hiding place at the end of it.
Look, if there's a reason we started doing this podcast, it is to look stupid on a regular basis. So I think that's the game. I just wanted to add on Harlequin's final point, just a horrible set of pre-season Prem Cup results. And look, how much do you really read into kind of pre-season? That's up to you. But I think when you've got that collection of results, I think the team that they put out last week in the Prem Cup against Leicester and the team that Leicester put out and the way that game went was probably the one where we were texting privately and we were thinking, that doesn't bode very well for a club trying to kind of get in a good spot to start the season. So I think that's why we're probably both a little bit low on Harlequins. And also I should stress we did these predicted tables blind, didn't we? There wasn't any kind of conferring in advance. We're nothing if not elite professionals in that regard. So let's chat about 8th place, which is we've both got Exeter, which is interesting. Now, Exeter Chiefs, we kind of wondered about for some time how much of a reset this is going to be over the summer. And the sounds of things when we hear from Rob Baxter are that it's massive. They've sort of literally taken things back to basics. Players are going to be held to account. Players have been told from the outset that the standards and what was produced last season in key moments is not acceptable. And so there's this determination from Exeter to kind of reset the whole mentality around the club. Now, if you look at the team for their opening game away at Northampton, it's kind of exciting. Like, there's exciting players in there. There's exciting wingers. There's a tight five, which looks handy. I know that Charlie, you were sort of told that Will Goodrick-Clark had been really impressive in pre-season. He gets the start, and that front row of him with Joseph Tueber in at hooker as well. There's potential there. I appreciate that Exeter fans would probably be hoping for a slightly higher lift in the table than from 9th last season to 8th this season. But if you can be in the mix for just on the fringe of that playoff spot, and I genuinely think that from 3rd until 7th, or maybe even 3rd until 8th, is just going to be so congested. I think this is definitely going to be a season where we see progress from Exeter, but there are still big questions long term around fly half in particular and a couple of other key positions. So, Charlie, why did you feel that 8th was the right place for Exeter to be?
Well, again, it's not because I'm hugely down on them. In fact, I think they've made 2 phenomenal signings in Tom Hooper and Lenny Cattell, signings that look even better now than when they were announced, because they've gone away and absolutely carved up for the Wallabies against the Lions and then over the Rugby Championship. I just part of it is their situation at 10. I think there's probably not that certainty there. I think that they will, more than anybody probably in the whole squad, Rob Baxter will be really hoping for a strong season from Harvey Skinner, for him to really look assured in that role, and actually for them to really sort out that 10, 12, 13 and just have consistency there. And that starts with 10. They'll want somebody to absolutely grab that position and look really influential, because they've got packs that can get on top of other sides. It looks like they're gonna continue with the sort of the age-old Rob Baxter kind of arrangement of having real big boppers at 4, 5, 6 and 7, and then having either Ross Vincent or Greg Fizzleau at 8, that lighter sort of player. And they've got big bodies there, and that goes a long way, that depth in the back five over the course of the season. So there's a lot to like there. I just think that other sides are perhaps more settled, more attuned with what they want to do tactically. And I just think over the course of the season that will probably lead to Exeter being a bit further down the table. But yeah, absolutely, as I say, there's potential there to leapfrog higher up, especially with Hooper and Ictal when they get back.
Yeah, not to give Exeter a pep talk, but I think that a great thing for them this season would be make Sandy Park a horrible place to go again, which it obviously wasn't last season, and arguably the season before, because teams have had more joy there than in recent years, and just to kind of disrupt the teams who are looking at higher honours and make a nuisance of themselves. I think that is certainly within the capabilities of the squad that Exeter have available, and the more we can sort of see them do that, then the better. Right, Charlie, this is where things get a little bit trickier because we sort of mishmashed, and in seventh we have two very different teams. So I think let's touch on them. I have got Leicester Tigers, who were runners up last season, so I appreciate that is a bit of a drop. And you have got Gloucester. Now, I won't reveal where I have Gloucester yet, and you don't necessarily have to reveal where you have Leicester yet. But why don't you just tell me first why you think that Gloucester will end up where you have them?
Yeah, well, this would be a drop for Gloucester from fifth last year, and that to me is just what convinced me to do that was just who they're losing, and the fact that although they have recruited well, I think really well, they are really smartly. I think that means they are going to have to start again to a certain degree. So Ross Byrne coming in, I think that's an excellent choice on a 3-year deal at 10. He will have time. He will be, as we've spoken before, he will be seriously motivated, I think, with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder to show his worth after being a fringe guy at Leinster and not necessarily seemingly being trusted to sort of be the guy at Leinster. He's now got that opportunity. They've added in a few sort of young, hungry back rowers. They basically revamped the back line and brought a lot of pace. I think all of that will really suit how they've looked to coach certainly in the last couple of seasons, and specifically what James Lightfoot Brown will look to do with that back line. Thomas Williams as captain is a good choice, I think. Is certainly sort of you're getting someone there who will embody how they'll go about the team. But I just think it's almost half a step backwards to go forwards with the squad makeup and with the lack of familiarity maybe within it. I also maybe worry about that tight five, particularly front row depth, and I think they're already ducking and diving a little bit there as far as unavailability going into the Sale game tonight as we record. I mean, we'll now that I've said that, what'll happen is Gloucester will get eight scrum penalties up in Sale, but that's the way I see it over the course of the season. I think, yeah, again, they're a side that could, I think, look towards the sort of verge of the playoffs if they get on a run. But I just think seventh, with the depth and the familiarity of sides above them in my table, is where I've got them.
I'm only smiling because I've done some predictions for the Substack on the Off-Field Review where I'm going to be predicting each Prem game throughout the season. And yeah, when I saw Gloucester's front row heading up to Sale, I did feel slightly concerned. So that's the reason I'm agreeing. I'll chat a bit more later about why I've got Gloucester where I've got them. With Leicester, I just feel like it's the combination of losing Julian Montoya at hooker, losing Andre Pollard at 10, sort of having to figure out who your 10 is going to be. But Jamie Blunier is the obvious successor to Montoya. But in terms of the kind of leadership you lose with Montoya going, I just think that's enormous. And that's going to be tricky how they manage that. Orlando Bailey gets the first nod at 10, I think, against Bristol on Sunday. I think that's good. I think he's clearly the most talented option they have there. And I'm not really buying the whole James O'Connor signing in terms of it's not a long-term signing. I think he could be a brilliant mentor for someone like Bailey and other 10s at the club. So really interested by how Bailey goes. But I think the combination of those two positions changing, plus a new head coach in Jeff Parling, who's taking on the job after Michael Checker left, I think if you mesh all those things together, I think Leicester will still be very good. But I think it's going to be so tight between third and seventh that actually they just might be the team who miss out. So that's why I've got Leicester where they've got them. And Charlie will hear why you've got Leicester potentially somewhere else a bit later. In sixth place, we've also differed because I have got Northampton Saints and you have got Saracens. So maybe if we just have a little chat about those. Tell me about Saracens. Why do you think that they'll be sixth?
Oh God, I'm so nervous about this one.
Really. Yes. This is what I want.
They're low, and do you know what it is? It's probably prop depth. And it's probably the fact that, again, as we've touched on before, they're going to have to sort out their back line, and it really will be a blend of experience and youth if they're brave enough to keep those really experienced faces on the side. And yeah, as we spoke about Exeter's back five depth, Saracens' back five depth, particularly their back row depth, is awesome. You know, that every time I've kind of reminded myself of this prediction and the fact that I've had Saracens sixth, I think Tom Willis, Ben Earl, Martin Gonzalez, Theo McFarlane, Mario Toji, Hugh Tizard I really rate, Nick Ezekwe, Andy Onyama Christie. These players are outstanding. They've got Nathan Mitchello at blindside, who was part of the England 20 World Champions. There are this crop of players that have come through underneath the sort of dynasty. Some of that dynasty is still there. Obviously, Jamie George and Farrell back for this season, but so they're the crop of sort of Ben Earl, Onyama Christie, that sort of group. Nick Tompkins have come through. I think they're now waiting on this really young group. We saw Tobias Elliott, who was very promising last season. I think if they come through and assert themselves, it could be very different. And we could see them sort of a playoff side again and really challenging again. I get, is that prop depth and that back line having to sort that out could click very well. They've had Farrell for a bit of the preseason, who will be like another coach. You know, all the cliches about him driving standards, you know, that could have a real galvanizing effect. I just think that, 5 other teams I just think might do better than them at the minute, but I am nervous, I have to say. Are you nervous about having Saints that low again?
Listen, if the exact top 10 that I've picked is correct by the time the season ends, then I'm laughing. But yeah, no, of course. No, yeah, Northampton maybe. Would they be the team that make me the most nervous? Maybe. I must say, I do like their recruitment. I do like Callum Chick. I thought it was pretty typical that he was captain on debut in the Prem Cup game against Saracens and scored a hat-trick. I was like, yeah, that checks out. But by all accounts, from the people we've chatted to, Anthony Belly's been really good throughout pre-season. And there's quite a luxury of having like a test by half. It's essentially your permanent backup for the season for when Finn Smith is not around. Also, Sneaky Young at 29, sort of assumed that he was well into his 30s, but no, that's not the case. So I like what they've done there. JJ Van der Mescht might end up being one of my favourite signings of the season. People were messaging saying how, connected with Northampton, were messaging saying how large he is, and he's absolutely enormous. He's actually enormous, but can play. So yeah, no, Northampton made me a bit nervous, and I think because it wants Mitchell and Finn Smith and Tommy Freeman are back, I think that's good. And if the pack are better with the additions of Chick and getting Sam Graham back from injury and Danilo Fischetti, yeah, I could easily see that being the prediction where I'm the most wrong. I just think there's going to be progress from last season. Is there going to be enough progress where they make the top 4? I don't know. I mean, I genuinely think 3rd and 7th could be separated by about 5 points, which is kind of what happened last season. So yeah, they're the team I have in 6th. Let's take a little pause and then we will dig into our top 5s. Right, Charlie, we're back. Top 5s. So if I flash those up on the screen on YouTube for everybody to see, you people who are just listening, 5th place, I have Saracens and you have Leicester. So I like Saracens fractionally more than you do for all the reasons that you said. I actually was looking at their team for their opening game, and I really like Nathan Michelot in the back row was someone who was suggested to me as someone who in pre-season has been really good, and it's cool to see him at blindside for their trip up to Newcastle. And I think we will see a lot of Fergus Burke and Owen Farrell as that 10-12. I think that'll pretty much be set in stone for the season. And it's really interesting to see how those two kind of dovetail with each other. Yeah, look, you could probably swap Northampton and Saracens in my table and I'd be fine with it. You could probably put Saracens in my top 4 and I'd be fine with it. I think they'll be very good and they'll be right in the mix again. I just think they will fractionally miss out on the playoffs. If I look at your 5th place team, you have got Leicester Tigers. Tell me why you've got Leicester in 5th when I had them in 7th.
Well, I think it's very interesting that neither of us have, and yeah, to stress we did this blind, no collusion, but for both of us to have both Leicester and Saracens out of the top 4, I think that goes to show how settled and how much we rate clearly other sides that we'll get onto later, but just also shows the sort of the differing degrees to which how those sides are in in transition to different degrees. I think there's lots I like about Leicester. I think you touched on it there. Just the collective and cumulative leadership that they miss with Cole, Ben Youngs, Montoya, Pollard, all of those leaving at once. They have, in a lot of places, I think, recruited well, or certainly have succession plans there. 10 is the exception there, and they're sort of muddling that as they go, or they'll allow Bailey, as we said, has got first chance, and then he'll be supplemented by James O'Connor. I just think I'm just curious as to who's driving the week now. It is all of that is new, and they've got guys who've been around it a long time. Ollie Chesham named new captain, fantastic player, fantastic leader. Jack Van Portfleet will be a big part of that as well, but it is new, and I just do wonder whether that will take a little bit of bedding in. They showed last season, they got on a roll. They actually started well, started really combatively. I was at their first game under Checker at Sandy Park, and they lose that. The season before, they 100% lose that. They fade away and lose that, and they came back brilliantly, which kind of was emblematic of the fight that Checker had instilled in them post Dan McKellar. That then came to, after a slump in the middle of the season, that then came to the fore for the run-in, which is absolutely where sides can really get a jump on others. We've seen Sale now, sort of, not to jump on that when we talk about them later, because neither of us have said them yet, but they show how important it is to just have a bit of know-how about you in that final few weeks of the season. I just think Leicester might have too much to do by then, or other sides just will have a bit more impetus towards the back end this season. I think you mentioned Jamie Blamire. Tarek Haffa is a really signing I'm really excited about, and how he can kick on at Leicester, and as he learns the sort of nuts and bolts of the set piece stuff, or continues to learn that. But yeah, I just have them. It's funny, Leicester support. I know enough Leicester supporters to know that they'll think I've totally written them off by having them fifth. I can see a world where both them and Saracens are in the playoff places, and we look extra dumb. But let's get to those playoff places right now, shall we?
He's suggesting more dumb than normal. I mean, that's a new level. Yeah. So the top four. So I feel like we can sort of break this down as its own little separate section. You have got Sale fourth, and I've got Gloucester fourth. So I should probably explain myself first, why I think Gloucester are going to make the playoffs for the first time in 6 years. And I think part of this is that they were actually far closer last season than I think people are appreciating to making the playoffs. They missed out by like 2 points. They were right in the range of it. And also, I feel like they're better off at the position which they've kind of struggled to get right for years, which is fly half. They finally have a top quality fly half who, even if he didn't end up being Ireland's number one fly half because of Johnny Sexton and the emergence of Sam Prendergast, I think Ross Byrne is talented enough to be one of the top fly halves in this league. You're pairing that with Thomas Williams, who's in his second season at the club, and now everything this club does runs through Thomas Williams in terms of their style. He's the captain. Does that make me nervous when he's not available? Yeah, a little bit. But I also like the kind of industrious back rowers that Gloucester have added in Jack Mann and James Venter, Josh Basham as well. I think those guys are just going to work tirelessly. If they get the approach right, and they didn't get this right, I don't think, at the start of last season, where they were trying to play like Bristol, but not necessarily with the same kind of conviction and execution. And so they were scoring loads, and they were letting in so many points. And then middle of the season, they kind of got more balanced. They started beating teams who went on to make the playoffs at home with good victories. I just think if they can get that right, and they can get the balance right, and if the defence improves, the set piece is going to be good. I just think they've got the halfbacks and the talent there to make the top four. And it'd be great if they did, because they'd be a sort of a newish face in that mix. If you've got Sale at fourth, and not to pull back the curtain too much, but I've got Sale at second. So I think we can so we're in agreement that Sale are going to be a playoff team. So let's chat a bit about them. Why do you think Sale will be a top four side?
Well, I think partly because they have been. They've established themselves in that mix, and they've established themselves in that mix by coming on really strongly at the back end of seasons with George Ford still there, steering things. He was absolutely phenomenal in those 2 tests, I thought, in Argentina. He just still has so much to ambition about him, and so much kind of steely sort of desire about him to keep playing well and keep bringing other players with him. I think they're settled. Sale as a side, I think it's always reassuring, or should be always reassuring for fans when there aren't that many ins and outs, and the ins are players like Nathan Jabulu, who could be an utter superstar. He could use Sale. Why not say this? I think he could use Sale as a springboard to be a Lions hooker. I think there's so much to like about him. Yeah, there's so much to like about him. He's a phenomenally explosive carrier. He has this relish for contact. He's excellent over the ball. A hell of a lot to like about him. He'll be in and around Dorian West and have Luke Cowan-Dickey as a mentor. So all of that is just really promising for him. They also brought in Jack Vermeulen, resourceful back rower, knows his way around the Premiership. I think where they're thin, and at this point clearly we're talking about teams' limitations as well. Lock is a question mark. And having said that, they've picked a 5-3 bench. They picked a 5-3 bench for Gloucester with 2 locks on it, which is interesting. Probably going to see. Again, you have going to have seen this or not seen this by the time this podcast comes out, but probably see Ernst van Rijn go into the back row to bring on one of those 2 locks on the bench. One of whom, Tom Burrow, who has been tipped by many to have a breakout season, ex-England under-20 captain, and I've been lucky enough to kind of chat to him a few times. Very impressive young man, very mature. Yeah, I just feel like we spoke about making home games bankers and just kind of accumulating a very good record at home. I think they're well set to do that, and then nick a few away, and then you're pretty much there if you can get into a habit of doing that.
I absolutely adore that you weren't going to big up Jabulu too much and tried to hold yourself back, and then did it anyway.
Just couldn't
resist. That's the kind of excitement I'm here for. Yeah, look, I'm with you. I just feel like they are very settled, and that gives me encouragement. And they're also one of the teams where you look at them playing at home on a Thursday night, as they are for the opener, or on a Friday night, as they often do, and you just think, yeah, I back Sale to win that home game. I don't know if the opposition are going to be able to go there and get a win. And that's testament to multiple factors, to Alex Anderson's coaching and the kind of culture he's built, to the way George Ford manages a game there so well, to the way their pack can compete. If you told me that Jack Vermeulen had been a Sale player for the last 8 years, I'd have probably just said, yeah, sure, fine, because it makes sense that he's the replacement for...
Right, that's a great shout.
It just makes sense, doesn't he? As the replacement for Jean-Luc Depree in the back row, like, yeah, that checks out. There's just a lot to like. 2 things I would love to see from Sale. I would love to see Tom Roebuck make this England wing conversation more difficult, and I would love to see him have a season where he is pushing best in the country status.
Well, his enhanced DPS contract is interesting, and we've seen Tommy Freeman suggest that he's going to be more at 13, so maybe that's had something to do with it. I think you're absolutely on the right lines there. He looked like he'd played 20 more tests than he had out in Argentina. He's a real focal point with the new laws as far as with making those high ball skills and those disruptive high ball skills, winning the ball back, so important. He's really well set.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the other thing I was going to say was Massey White inside centre. I think he potentially is due for a big season, and Sale kind of need him to have one in midfield. So I'd say he's someone who excites me as well. So you have Sale 4th, I have Sale 2nd. 3rd place, we're back in agreement for the first time since 8th place, which is quite nice. And we both think Bristol will be in 3rd. Why, Charlie, do you think Bristol will make it back to the playoffs and be in 3rd place for what I think would be, off the top of my head, a 5th semi-final in 7 seasons?
Well, that helps again, as we said with Sale, knowing your way around, knowing your methods, being really kind of aligned tactically. Bristol have a very distinct as far as how they go about things, and they do seem to be. There's just a lot of they're very attuned to that. They're very attuned to this kind of different way that they play by setting into structure in their own half, by running those exits, and that they've come unstuck doing that, but there is a real conviction kind of collectively about them there. They've recruited really well. That's another reason. I think Tom Jordan is an excellent signing, particularly given that they're going to run a skinny squad, and he's starting at 15, isn't he, against Leicester. He'll play a lot at 12, I would have thought, and I think he told you, didn't he, that he sees himself as a 10 still. So there are a lot of ways that he's a very good, very effective signing. I can see him as a sort of medium-term successor to McGinty there, but while you've got McGinty, somebody who knows Pat Lam game plans inside out, I think it's smart that he's still there. Pedro Rubiolo doesn't really count as a signing for this year because they brought forward his move from Newcastle while he rehabbed from knee injury. He'll come after the Rugby Championship, but is exactly what they need. That bopper, really steely lock to have in there. Built looks more on the pitch like a tight head. He's just a very kind of big, robust presence. Joe Batley, I think Bristol their passage to the top four would have been more comfortable without a few frustrating injuries for Joe Batley last season. He's a very big player for them, and I guess that is a risk of running that skinny squad that they do. I think injuries, certainly in clusters in the same position, can be really, really damaging, but there's still a lot to like about them, and they have a very, very high ceiling.
Yeah, love all of that. I think the Tom Jordan point. Yeah, he said to me, I played 90% of my career at 10. And in my head, I sort of thought, well, I'm not sure how much 10 you're going to play. And that's kind of born out of the selection for the opening game. Yeah, look, maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid that Pat Lam was giving me at the pre-season launch. But if they have really sort of taken the defence back to the bolts and screws, and it's going to be a lot better, and you're combining that with an attack which now has Jordan, who I think is like an elite playmaker, and Lewis Rees-Zammit, who I feel weirdly like people are sleeping on, even though nothing has really changed about his kind of talents and the quality he offers.
I had to pick a top 10 signings, and he wasn't on he was on yours, wasn't he? He was
I think he was number 2 on mine. Yeah.
He wasn't on mine just because I thought that he might take a while to sort of re-establish himself. I think it is a very smart pickup, makes sense on so many levels, not least because he will really want to hit the ground running and reassert himself as a totally electric, game-changing presence. And he scored a try against Gloucester it was PREM Cup, wasn't it, rather than just a friendly. But all it took was, I think it was Toby Baker, centre, to just get an arm free, and he was trailing in the middle of the park, and he's away, weaved around the fullback. His balance and his pace is still absolutely there, and he will just get a lot of chances as part of this side, because Gabriel Ibitoye was joint top try scorer. Calaveti Ravovo, who's on the bench this week, was right in the mix for that as well. Bristol give their explosive runners the best chance to absolutely show those wares. It's not rocket science, but they do that very well.
This doesn't happen with every player, but every time I hear Ravovo's name, I hear a sort of Super Rugby commentator saying it, and I'm sad that he's not playing for the Canes or the Highlanders or someone. Yeah, I just think Rees-Zammit, he would honestly be my pick for top try scorer if you were asking me right now. I just think, like you said, their template, the way they approach things, I just think Bristol are going to be very good. And if they can make the strides that they're suggesting they will defensively, that's going to be a problem for a lot of teams, because you might be able to kind of contain their attack for a little bit, but then if you can't break down their defence, then you're in trouble. So yeah, I think that's why I've got Bristol third. We've touched on Sale, who I have in second place, but Charlie, you in second place have Northampton Saints. So Northampton making the leap from 8th last season, when they were also Champions Cup runners-up, it should be added, to second and a home semi-final. Talk to me. What's your thinking?
It's a big jump, isn't it? 8th to second. I think it's to do with just how much they did underperform last season. There were reasons for that. They were kind of contributing a big core of England regulars for the first time, and I think they would admit themselves that if they haven't already, that I think that fatigue factor, emotional fatigue as well as physical fatigue, kind of really damaged them. And I think they were allowed to show their potential in the Champions Cup when the pressure of the league was sort of alleviated, and they just maybe had just more bodies around and sort of more balanced size that they could go into games with that. They're sort of, I remember Phil Dowson giving a fantastic interview after they'd beaten Leinster in that quite, absorbing Champions Cup semi-final, where actually he said, well, which is a very typical manner from him. He was sort of saying, look, don't pile pressure on me. After we came out from Six Nations, I said, look, let's go and win it all. And we got absolutely pumped at home by Leicester. And that was a game. There are some games over the course of the season, and say, if we go back to Leicester really, really briefly, they produced that performance at Saints. I don't think many would have predicted how. I don't think many would have predicted that they'd win that game, but they won that game so convincingly. And then another kind of swing game for their whole season again was beating Sale at home. That was Leicester. The games for Saints, apart from the game when they came back at home to beat Saracens when their playoff hopes were pretty much done, or if not were done anyway, a lot of those swing games just didn't go the right way for them last season, where they had the season before when they got themselves in the top four. I just think we've mentioned their recruitment. Bellew is so smart because a lot of the time they have Finn Smith and George Furbank away with Ireland, so they're sort of their gun 10, and then they're sort of very accomplished backup 10. Now they have a very accomplished specialist there to step in, who again, and it's the value of this is potentially understated, who will really want to prove a point himself. Van Amesh, you've mentioned. Callum Chick, you've mentioned, really smart. Fischetti not even starting this weekend on the bench because Emmanuel Eogan was on the verge of England stuff, So I think they're just there's a lot of balance about them. I think that with guys like Chick, with Tom Pearson, players like Henry Pollock elsewhere in the back row will just be a little bit freer. They even got, depth. I don't think Tom Lockett isn't in the 23 for this weekend, is he? And neither, I don't think, is Chunya Munga, but they've got Alex Coles there. They've got Ed Prowse, who was part of that Champions Cup. They're like Bath in that they're players that have been fringe players for a little while, have now had enough experience whereby, they can certainly rotate and still put out strong sides, and you have absolutely no qualms about the young players that are coming through, because there's this tradition of how they have come through, hit the ground running, and there's just a sort of awareness from these young players straight away about how the club plays, what the tactical plans are, and they're often very suited to those tactical plans.
I mean, listen, if you're trying to make me reconsider it, I'm thinking about where I've got them, but I think those were very good points. It wouldn't shock me if they were higher. We'll soon find out. Listen, I'm very happy that we're in agreement about the first place team, and I don't think we almost need to spend too much time with them because we're so sure that Bath are going to be in first, and I'm pretty sure they will be champions again as well, unless you differ there. Have you got a predicted winner?
I would love for there to be would we be up to 6 and 6 if there was one? So you're looking at someone like Sale or Bristol there to win it, for that to be the case, and that would be remarkable. But I have to say, Bath would be. I think if you're looking at the things that could derail them, apart from massive injury crises or something like that, I think they're obviously pretty well set up to deal with those, because there's this virtuous circle where their younger players have picked up game time and those wholesale, when John Van Graan was making wholesale rotation, you didn't necessarily know who those players were a couple of years ago. Now they are pretty well established, and I think maybe the Lee Blackett's departure, allied to the fact that there is a bit of a availability crisis at 10 with Orlando Bailey gone, Kieran Donahue injured, Sam Harris I think injured, Finn Russell and Santi Carreras both unavailable. They've got Max Ajomo at 10, which is very interesting. Max Ajomo, they've got Max Ajomo and they've got Cameron Redpath on the pitch as well as Ollie Lawrence. So all of those are starting. You've got a lot of poise at first receiver, haven't you? So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that. And that's one thing that you're thinking, is that going to bring them down? They've got Sale in the second week, which, if they lose, if they somehow slip up at Harlequins and then have that game, that's potentially tricky. But yeah, I just back them to navigate their way to the top of the table. And then when they have, if they get anything, if they get a good portion of their top 30 players available for the playoffs, they're going to be in a very enviable position, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say the highest compliment I can give them is that with most teams, if they were out without their three fly half options and they were having to play a centre there, you'd think, they're going to be in trouble. And yet I still think they're going to go to Harlequins on Friday night and probably win by about 3 scores. But they're just so settled as a group. I think the forward depth that Bath have is just outrageous. If you think that on the bench at the Stoop on Friday, you have Ross Maloney, Ted Hill, and Sam Underhill all available, and Kepi Tuipulotu sort of come off the bench and cause chaos with some lively runs like we've seen him do for the young England under-20s. A lot of other clubs just don't have those kind of resources, and even when the international windows roll around and some of those players are kind of called up by England, they're still going to be so strong. Arundel is a brilliantly underrated signing who will score a hatload of tries, and I think that they just seem so. It's not a coincidence if I think about my own rankings that the two clubs who I think are the most settled, Sale and Bath, make up the top two, and are the two teams who I think will be home semi-finalists, because I just think that they're in such positions of strength from last season. So yeah, that's why I've got Bath first, Charlie. That's why you've got Bath first. I think that's brilliant. I think we've done the table. It's going to be exactly as we've both predicted. Somehow it's going to end up that way. Let's have a little pause and then let's chat about the big game at Twickenham on Saturday, the Women's Rugby World Cup final. Charlie, massive game, Women's Rugby World Cup final. Are you going to be there? I think you are going to be there. Am I right in saying?
I'm going to be there.
I think it's going to be. Obviously, the game's going to be fascinating. That clash of kind of England's set-piece power against Canada's sort of broad attacking play. Not that England can't have moments of X-Factor quality from Meg Jones and Ellie Kildunn and fling it wide themselves. The game fascinates me, but the occasion just fascinates me as well. I think the fact you can have such an amazing crowd, such a celebration of the sport and of the women's tournament and of the women's game. I'm very envious that you're going to be there and that I'm not going to be able to witness it firsthand, because I just think it's going to be an awesome occasion. We sort of touched on what John Mitchell said earlier in terms of how you're kind of leaning outcome-wise, results-wise, with a couple of days to go. What are you sort of thinking?
Well, I'd say after being at Canada's semi-final win over New Zealand, I was leaning towards them, not only because of how they played, but their manner afterwards. They were just. We've all seen now, and one of the most famous examples is England men in 2019. We've seen fantastic semi-final performances backed up by a little bit of a damp squib of a performance in the final by the same team, just because I think, again, it's as much emotional energy as it is physical energy. It's so hard to sort of replicate that. But Canada did not they seemed extremely composed. They seemed extremely they mentioned it a few times, just sort of saying, look, that was great, but we drew with New Zealand earlier this year. So the belief wasn't a problem. It was just absolutely just putting on the field what we'd prepared to do. And the fact they did that so convincingly, it was honestly one of the most impressive 45 minutes I can remember from a side, just because of the variety and how smart they looked and what they cycled through as far as attacking plans. Yeah, but as the week has gone on, it's sort of I just think that England are. You become aware that England are. They won 32 games in a row, and we are just nitpicking. I think they are subject to a higher level of scrutiny than anybody else in this tournament, which is totally justifiable. And I do think that the weapons they have, albeit maybe less entertaining, are mighty effective, to use that word that John Mitchell keeps using.
No, I think you're spot on there. I think there's an efficiency about England which is not a world away from the men's side in 2003 in terms of they have these core strengths which they're absolutely outstanding at, and with the set piece, and that's where they really deliver. I must say that I kind of the narrative around Canada, which has sort of gone from them being dark horses at the start of the tournament to the way they have just played as a team collectively, they're just a joy to watch. Some of the offloading in the New Zealand semi-final to create those tries, and some of the passing and angles they were cutting was just fantastic. In Sophie de Goody, they genuinely have a superstar, and we joked about it last week. Like, you know, if England aren't going to win this World Cup final, having a forward kicking a winning like goal is, you know, a pretty cool story. It could happen. Like, I'm really not ruling it out.
No, absolutely. And she's this week been nominated for World Player of the Year, hasn't she? Alongside Meg Jones and Georgia Miller. I think it would be Jones and de Goody for me above Georgia Miller, and I think it would be de Goody to win it. I think regardless of how it's been interesting. A few of the England players I've heard them in the press sort of say that that Jones should win it. Absolutely their prerogative to sort of plug their mate. I think de Goody's performances at this World Cup have been on another plane. I think she's almost, if she's not quite redefined, we spoke before, didn't we, about how she sort of brings the poise of a Retallick or a Whitelock and the kicking of a John Eales. So you have had second rows that are that kind of effervescent before, but it is just so cool to see. She's been fun.
For the usual award system process, if a player from the potentially losing side was still named player of the tournament or player of the year, because we so often it's just give it to a player from a winning side. That would be such a, if it does pan out that way and England end up winning the tournament and Canada lose and Sophie de Goody was to be named player of the year, I think that's awesome because it's such a great reflection of what a tournament she's had and how well she's played. I would love that.
I think Ardie win it? Did Ardie Surveyor win it in 2023? So after, obviously, albeit a very, very tight World Cup.
Yeah, after the 1 point final, which is good. Yeah. I think it's healthy. I think it's the narrative kind of changing about how we do these awards and how we kind of recognise actual individual performances by rewarding the players who deserve it the most. I think that's great. What I would say is massive from an England perspective. If you're going to shut down Canada, flinging it out to these mega talented wingers and stop those quick passes inside to the likes of de Goody and to stop Alex Tessier from running the show, then you're going to need turnovers and break down pressure. And I think Hannah Bottoman is massive in that regard in terms of her jackling threat and the rest of kind of England's back row. I really think that unless England can get an advantage there, and Canada are able to get quick ruck ball, then that's a problem. And that's where England might struggle.
Yeah, Justine Pelletier, the Canada scrum half, was allowed to just run the show against New Zealand. Having said that, New Zealand fronted up. There were a few clearly targeted to Goody early on in the game, some shuddering hits on her, but they just rode that out and they were really coordinated with those pick and goes through around the offloading game that they've got, and they generated pace that way. There are a few ways that England will want to just control Canada and specifically control the pace of that phase play. There'll be clearly jackling, as you say. There'll be a few wrestly sort of upright tackles. Sadia Kabaya is going to just going to be let loose to just tackle absolutely everything, but controlling that pace is so important. Controlling the pace and so boring and so kind of route one thing to say, but controlling where Canada have to play, really, really important as well.
Oh, it's going to be tight. I really, yeah, like you, I think England's winning run that they've been on, the pain of, you almost forget actually how much the pain of 3 years ago, 2021 tournament, which was played in 2022, you almost forget how much that can actually drive a team. And actually, for all the chat about the pressure and the sense of expectation and the winning run, trying to convert that kind of mental anguish into success is a kind of such a pure form of motivation that you can't really generate or buy. You can't create that with kind of pre-match hype. That's going to be there. That's going to fuel this England team to deliver. And for that reason, I don't feel as though they're a team that will not rise to the occasion. And I almost wonder if they have been holding a few little things back for this final. But yeah, it's going to be a hell of an occasion, Charlie. You're going to have a very, very good time trying to take all of it in. Yeah, I'm very jealous. So yeah, that's the Women's World Cup final. Make sure you watch it. I think it's 4 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. We'll take a little pause and then we're going to do Name That Player and then we're out of here. Right, last week's Name That Player Played for Nottingham between 2010 and 2012. Played for Gloucester between 2012 and 2017. Played for Leicester between 2017 and 2020. Played for Scarlets. And as Charlie pointed out, trying to put the Wikipedia authority straight, also played for Van, was Charlie. Oh, sorry, he also had 37 caps for Tonga. He was.
He is Sione
He is.
Kalanfoni, tackling and carrying machine. Just used to run riot at the top of the stats charts, didn't he? Who still is
He
in for Van, no doubt.
He is. He must absolutely be doing that. Right. So this week's player, if you're watching on YouTube, the wiki is flashed up on the screen, but I will read it out for the listeners. Played for Worcester from 2009 to 2013. Played for Gloucester from 2013 until 2017. Played for Exeter from 2017 to 2020. Played for Worcester again from 2020 until 2022. Played for Zebre from 2022 until 2023. Played for Coventry for 2023 to 2025. And is now at Worcester for a third stint, 2025 to present. Now listen, no conferring. Figure it out for yourselves. Big reveal will be next week. Charlie, what a lovely bumper episode that was. I feel very intrigued by the Prem season now, and I look forward to just denying that I ever made those pre-season predictions. So fantastic.
No, it's good to have something to hold ourselves accountable to, mate.
Yeah, no. Listen, we need that. We need to just be kept on the straight and narrow. Listen, thank you, listeners, so much for all of your support. I'm delighted to say that we passed 100 subscribers on YouTube this week. There's lots more to come, so please subscribe there, as well as on your usual podcast providers. We're really enjoying doing these episodes, and we've had some great feedback. So thank you very much. Enjoy the start of the Prem. Enjoy the Women's Rugby World Cup final, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.